I was sleeping without clothes. Not out of desire, but because the emptiness beside me had grown too heavy to bear. The sheets felt cold against my skin, the air conditioner hummed like a mechanical lullaby, and the only warmth I could find came from the memories I was trying to forget. My name isn't important, his might be, but I'm not sure I can say it anymore without tasting disappointment. We had been married for 7 years, 7 years of shared laughter, quiet breakfasts, and slow, invisible decay. The house was silent, that kind of silence that presses against your ears until it starts to sound like a scream. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, a reminder that time still moved, even if we didn't. I glanced at the space where he usually slept. The pillow was untouched, still shaped the way it was when I made the bed this morning. He said he'd be home late again. Work, he called it. Meetings, projects, deadlines. I had stopped asking questions a long time ago, not because I trusted him completely, but because I feared the answer would confirm what my heart already suspected. I reached for the lamp and turned it off, letting darkness settle over the room. The dim orange glow from the streetlight slipped through the curtains and crawled across the floor, stretching toward the bed like hesitant fingers. My skin prickled under its touch. I wasn't cold, I was just awake in every sense that mattered. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time he had looked at me as if I was still his. Maybe it was our anniversary. Maybe it was longer ago than that. There had been a moment, once, when he brushed my hair from my face and smiled like he meant it. Now, even that memory felt borrowed from someone else's life. I turned onto my side and stared at the nightstand. His phone sat there, screen dark, silent. I hated that it felt like another person between us. Something I didn't belong to, something that knew him in ways I no longer did. I reached out, my fingers hovering above it, then pulled back. I wasn't ready, not yet. My breath caught when headlights flashed briefly across the wall. I thought, for an instant, that it might be him, but the sound faded down the street. Just another stranger coming home to someone who still waited. I almost envied them. The digital clock blinked 1:43 a.m. I should have been asleep, but sleep had become a luxury of the untroubled. Instead, I lay there, exposed and restless, wondering when love had turned into habit. The bed felt too big for one body. I tried to imagine his day, his voice, his hands, the way he loosened his tie as soon as he entered the house. But lately, even his routine felt foreign, rehearsed. He had a new cologne now, something faint and expensive. It lingered on his clothes longer than his presence lingered in the room. I turned onto my back and let the ceiling blur above me. I wanted to believe that things could go back to what they were. But truth has a sound, and tonight it echoed louder than hope. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, sharp and sudden, breaking the stillness. I almost laughed at how startled I was, how fragile silence can make you. I reached for the blanket, hesitated, and pulled it only halfway over me. My body wasn't the thing that needed covering. The phone vibrated once, the sound soft but unmistakable. My heart stuttered. A single light illuminated the darkness, a name glowing faintly on the screen. Not mine. For a long time, I just stared at it, motionless. Then, almost without realizing it, I whispered into the empty room, "You forgot to lock your secrets." And in that moment, I knew sleep was over. Morning arrived without permission. The kind of pale light that slips through curtains like an uninvited guest, too soft to hate, too cruel to ignore. I hadn't slept. My body felt heavy, but my mind was alert, coiled tight around that one glowing image from the night before, the message on his phone. He was home by the time I heard the birds. I didn't hear him come in. The sound of the front door must have blended into the static hum of dawn. Now, his steady breathing filled the room, as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't quietly tilted while he slept. The phone was still there, face down on the nightstand. Silent, harmless, if not for what it held inside. I stared at it until the screen lit again, unprovoked. A new message appeared. No password, no barrier. Just temptation, pulsing faintly in the glow. My fingers moved before my thoughts could stop them. The screen unlocked like it was waiting for me. One message. 6 words. Last night was perfect. Miss you already. Each letter carved something out of me. Small, precise, merciless. I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood, that I'd find some hidden context, some innocent explanation. But the truth doesn't hide when it's written that plainly. I glanced at him. His arm was draped across his chest, his wedding ring dull under the morning light. His face looked peaceful, almost boyish in sleep. And for a moment, I hated how beautiful he still seemed. Betrayal shouldn't wear the face of comfort. I wanted to wake him, to shake him, to scream until my throat turned raw. But the voice that came out of me was calm, too calm. Inside, I was an ocean pretending to be a pond. My eyes lingered on the sender's name, Lara. Just 4 letters. Soft. Intimate. It didn't matter who she was, what mattered was that she existed in the space between us. She had already taken what used to be mine, the way he smiled at messages, the way he lingered before replying, the late nights that ended too early for love to be innocent. The air in the room thickened. My pulse echoed in my ears. The world shrank to 2 people, the one who slept beside me, and the one who lived inside his phone. I placed the device back on the nightstand gently, almost reverently, as if it were fragile glass. I didn't want him to wake up yet. I wasn't ready for lies dressed as apologies. Instead, I lay there and listened, to the soft rhythm of his breath, to the ceiling fan slicing through the silence. Each rotation sounded like a countdown. Part of me wondered when it had started. Was it after our anniversary? Before the promotion? Maybe when I began sleeping early and he began coming home late. Infidelity doesn't arrive like a storm, it seeps in like water through cracks you stop noticing. My thoughts drifted to her words again, last night was perfect. The simplicity of it hurt the most. There was no poetry in betrayal, just routine. I turned to look at him again. His phone buzzed once more, a small vibration that rattled the nightstand. His eyes flickered open briefly. He smiled at me, sleepy, gentle, practiced. "Morning," he whispered. I forced a smile back. "Morning." My voice didn't sound like mine. He reached for the phone automatically, thumb brushing across the screen. The message disappeared. His eyes stayed neutral, unreadable. He didn't notice I was already watching him, memorizing every movement, every silence. I wanted to ask who Lara was. I wanted to watch him try to build a lie fast enough to hide behind. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I turned to face the ceiling again. My heart steadied into something colder, quieter. If truth was a wound, I wanted to feel every inch of it before it healed wrong. And as he got up to shower, humming softly like a man with nothing to hide, I whispered into the sheets, "Last night might have been perfect for her, but this morning belongs to me." The kitchen smelled of coffee and distance. I stood by the counter, watching the steam curl upward like a ghost trying to escape. The morning light was too bright, too honest. It illuminated everything I wanted to keep hidden, the trembling in my hands, the tension stitched across my face, the stillness in my voice. He walked in quietly, shirt half buttoned, humming something tuneless. His hair was damp from the shower, drops of water trailing down the side of his neck. He looked ordinary, like any man on any morning. That's what made it worse. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, reaching for his mug. His tone was casual, practiced, the kind of tone used by people who have already rehearsed the normal. I poured the coffee, the dark liquid swirling into the cup between us. "I was sleeping without clothes," I said softly. He paused, just slightly. The kind of pause that only guilt can summon, half a second, but long enough for me to notice. His hand froze on the handle, then continued, pretending nothing had shifted. "That's so," he said with a faint smile. "You should have waited up. I was late." The words landed somewhere between excuse and habit. He took a sip, avoiding my eyes. I watched him carefully, memorizing every detail, the way his throat moved when he swallowed, the way his jaw tensed like he was biting back a confession. "I did wait," I said. "For a while." He looked up then, finally meeting my gaze. For a heartbeat, the room stilled. The air between us thickened with everything unspoken. I didn't ask who Lara was. I didn't need to. The truth was already in the way he blinked too slowly, in the way his fingers tightened around the mug. There are languages beyond words, and guilt, I've learned, is fluent in all of them. The silence stretched, pulling at the edges of the morning. I turned away first, reaching for a plate. The scrape of ceramic against the counter was the only sound left. "You've been quiet lately," he said finally, his voice unsure. Something wrong. Something wrong. I almost laughed. Instead, I set the plate down gently, afraid the sound of breaking might feel too satisfying. "No," I replied, still facing away. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About what it takes for a person to stop noticing they're lying." He didn't answer. I could feel his stare on the back of my neck, searching for the version of me that still believed him. But she was gone, buried under sleepless nights and unread messages. I turned slowly. His face was calm, or trying to be. But there it was, the flicker in his eyes, that tiny fracture where denial begins to crumble. I stepped closer, my voice low, almost kind. "Do you ever think about what we used to be? Before we started pretending?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. I didn't wait for them. Instead, I reached for his cup and poured the coffee down the sink. The stream hissed softly, brown turning to nothing. I watched it swirl, disappear, leaving behind only the faint stain of something once warm. He watched me, confused, maybe scared. I didn't look back. "That's how it happens," I murmured. "Love doesn't end with fights. It ends like this, quietly, in the middle of an ordinary morning." The room was silent again. He set his cup down, carefully this time, as if afraid of the sound. Then he said the thing I'd been waiting for, the one sentence that would make it real. "It's not what you think." I smiled. A small, tired smile. "It never is." The clock ticked once, loud and final. Somewhere, a bird sang outside, mocking the stillness inside. He looked down, searching for a reply. I walked past him, brushed his sleeve lightly, not a touch of affection, but of farewell. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel naked anymore. I felt seen. Morning found me again, though I hadn't asked it to. Light seeped through the curtains, thin and uncertain, touching everything I'd left untouched. The bed beside me was empty now, the sheets still creased from where he had slept. His scent lingered faintly in the air, cologne, shampoo, and something foreign I couldn't name. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows after something breaks. Not chaos, not noise, just the stillness that comes when there's nothing left to say. He had left early. I didn't hear him go. Maybe he didn't want to wake me. Maybe he didn't want to see me awake. Either way, the space he occupied was now just air and memory. I sat up slowly, the sheets slipping down my shoulder. The air felt lighter, as though the walls themselves had exhaled. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of waiting. I didn't check my phone. I didn't glance toward the door. I simply existed, and that was enough. On the nightstand, the same phone from last night lay where he'd forgotten it. I stared at it for a long time, considering. There was a time I would have searched it again, for messages, for proof, for closure. But I didn't need more truth. I had already seen enough to understand everything. People think betrayal destroys love. It doesn't. It just reveals what's been dead for a long time. I stood and walked toward the window. The morning outside was soft, a sky washed pale, clouds drifting like thoughts I no longer needed to chase. I pulled the curtains open wide. The sunlight poured in, unfiltered, sharp but cleansing. The room came alive again, the shimmer of dust in the air, the reflection of light against the mirror, the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the next room. It was ordinary, beautifully, mercifully ordinary. On the dresser sat our wedding photo. I picked it up. 2 smiling faces, frozen in a promise they didn't know they'd break. My fingers traced the glass. I felt no anger, no grief, only gratitude that I had once believed in something that pure belief, even when misplaced, has its own kind of beauty. I placed the photo face down. Some truths don't need an audience anymore. In the kitchen, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The smell filled the air, rich and grounding. I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter, the same spot where I'd stood just hours ago, listening to him lie without words. But today, the silence didn't suffocate. It felt clean, new. I took a sip and smiled faintly. It was bitter, but real. I thought of calling him, asking if he'd left his phone on purpose, if he wanted it back. But then I realized, I didn't owe him my voice anymore. Silence was my answer. I gathered his things into a small box, a tie, a book, his favorite watch. No anger in the motion, no trembling. Just quiet intention. I placed the box by the door. It would be waiting for him when he came back, if he did. Before leaving the room, I looked once more at the unmade bed. The sheets were still tangled, the same way they had been when I whispered, "You forgot to lock your secrets." Now, I whispered something else. I didn't. I wasn't sure where I would go next, maybe nowhere at all. Maybe just forward. I glanced at my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman who looked back wasn't broken, she was stripped bare of illusion, dressed only in truth. I was sleeping without clothes, I said softly. But now, I'm covered in my own strength. The words echoed gently, carried by sunlight and silence. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel exposed. I felt free.